Professor Michelle Chazadowski, geopolitical expert, will be joining us in 30 minutes to give us his rundown on whether he thinks they're going to be attacking Iran, who owns and controls the three puppets, big government fascist, communist, communist, big government, commie fascist, and commie, double, triple, super commie fascist. It doesn't matter either way. They're all owned by the same boys. They're going to give you the global tax and a whole new core of tattletales running your life, inspecting your home, not letting you have family farms, taxes on beef, just total. They admit neo-feudalism. The globalists want it in the middle class. Al Gore wants 300 million on 10 million. Brown shirts are kind of like Mao's little red book. Youth brigades. I mean, they say this. They're already in Austin popping tires of SUVs. I pulled up to Zilker Park with my kids last week, take them on the train when I took off Thursday, and I noticed that there were a couple of SUVs that had their tires popped. So I was driving a smaller SUV. It might have been seen as holy because it was Japanese, but I went and parked it, down a little bit so they wouldn't pop my tires. I saw the ne'er-do-wells walking around engaging in their religious ceremony. They burn down things, burn down ski resorts, you name it, but they don't care about genetic engineering, open-air species testing, things that are causing problems. No, it's all about harassing people. They can't wait. And the new Green Brigades are already being released. Professor, you want to talk about that?
And by the way, I've written about in articles in Canada Free Press that your listeners can look at. But the whole environmental movement, we needed that. We needed change. We needed to look at things differently. But what happens with these things, Alex, is that the special interest groups and extremists grab these things and they co-opt them for their own personal ends. Now, when you ask me about how can we slow this down, the role of the extremists, which I've struggled with all of my career, is say what's the purpose of them? It's sort of like if we got rid of the mosquitoes, would the world come to an end? And what I've realized is the role of the extremists is to find the limits for the rest of us. I mean, if you think about feminism, for example, it was needed. There's still some changes needed, but the majority of women were saying, well, how far do we go with this? And then some women did silly things, and the majority said, no, that's going too far. Now we're losing more than we're gaining. Well, that's precisely what's happened with this environmental thing. That, we need to care about the planet, we need to understand, and we need to live in harmony with nature and everything else, but now these people are just taking it beyond, and they're using it for their own personal and political gains, and of course that will also feed back on them, as we were talking before the break about the rising food prices and the damage that's being done. And by the way, there's another aspect to this. Paul Dreesen's written a book called Eco-Imperialism, and this is the imposition of these ecological values of these extremists on the developing countries.
Yeah, I mean, Doc, this is their excuse to run our lives and have corporate communism, where they corporatize our wealth. I had Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz on last week, and he said, the neo-fascists corporatize everything at the top, and they give us socialism, but only as a conduit to suck our goods and our resources and our labor out of us, and they use these front groups. I mean, look, that's all that's happening in Anwar. Atlantic Richfield executives, I've had them on. They found more oil than Saudi Arabia. We're not allowed to have it because there's too much oil. It's meant to create artificial scarcity. The cartel's doing it with the oil companies. They're not letting us have the oil. I mean, does anybody think anybody cares about a few million hippies in sandals? They're not stopping us having that oil. The oil companies have got too much oil, and they've created artificial scarcity. See, they want you to believe it's the idiot environmentalist. Go ahead.
Well, exactly, and that's the interesting thing about it, the paradox that it's to the benefit of the oil companies and the extreme environmentalists to have a shortage. It suits both their ends for different reasons, and I couldn't agree with you more. But just to give you another example of how they exploit.
Well, listen, Doc, I've been interrupting you a lot. It's just so interesting. Okay. I'm going to try to stick a rubber ball in my mouth after this quick break, and then you've got the floor for the 20 minutes we've got left. You can just talk about whatever you want. But I want to shatter paradigms, because I know ExxonMobil and others have been forced for decades to actually fund the environmental. They call them wackos. They're not wackos. They're getting power, they're getting money, now they're getting guns, and they're coming for us. Well, he's an amazing individual. Timothy F. Ball writes for major publications, books, you name it. Mr. Ball, tell us about some of your writings, some of your books, some of your info, where we can find out more about that.
Well, we've got a website, the Natural Resources Stewardship Project, which is focusing on climate change right now, but we need to look at all the resources and get a good handle on those, and that's at nrsp.com. I also helped set up and advise the Friends of Science group at friendsofscience.org. And I'm still publishing, even though I'm technically retired. I write articles on a regular basis for Canada Free Press. I was doing an article for 17 years for farmers in a magazine called Country Guide, and then I guess I got politically incorrect and they let me go, but the farmers need the help and the information to understand what's going on, because
well, the New World Order is smart, because they will make it about money. About, I mean, when I hear ads like, come by the hardware store, we're green, it's the green living, you've got to do it. I mean, it's a total takeover of society. It's a new religion where they boss you around, and Whole Foods here in Austin says, we don't have plastic bags anymore. And, you know, I'm just tired of it. Go ahead.
Well, of course, what they've done is they take the moral high ground, and so when people like me stand up and try to argue, you know, you say, well, they can look down on you. Say, well, you're not green, you don't care, and anybody that dares to question it, I think that's one of the frightening things is vast segments of the society that are bullied into silence by these people, and I see it with the politicians. I mean, behind the fence, they'll say to you, yeah, we agree with you, we know what the science is saying, and so on, but we daren't show anything to suggest that we're not totally environmental.
They also lie. They also lie.
Green.
They also lie. They say no scientist on Earth believes it's not real. We have 2,000. And then it just turns out they just put people's names on it.
Yeah, well, of course, that's the numbers game, and it is a consensus thing, and the consensus is not a scientific fact, and it is, but consensus works in politics, and the number, by the way, that they use is the 2,500 people of the IPCC, this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the guy that was responsible for setting that up was the guy I mentioned earlier, Maurice Strong, and he's there with George Soros and all of those people, and he set up the United Nations Environmental Program, in which they defined that they can, if they're going to study climate, they can only look at human effects on climate. Ignore what natural climate is and only look at the human portion. Well, how can you possibly know whether humans are having an effect if you don't know how the climate changes naturally? But that's their mandate. And of course, with the authority of the UN, and Strong is on record as saying he chose the UN because he could appoint the people he wanted. He could get all the money he wanted. He had no control. He didn't have to run for election or anything else. And the IPCC is the 2,500. But of the 2,500, Alex, 1,900 of them are not looking at climate change in science. They're looking at, okay, let's accept that humans are causing it, and what are the impacts going to be?
Exactly. So, the meeting was about what they were going to do about man-made global warming. It wasn't a scientific treatise and manifesto and declaration of fact, and then thousands of them who've been associated with this and other programs have come public and said, I didn't agree to all this. I just was invited and paid and flown there, and they put my name on this.
Exactly, and a lot of them have quit over it, but that's where the consensus number comes from. And by the way, of the 2,500, less than 300 were involved in the actual science. And to show you how political it is, the mandate or their rules say that you publish the summary first. You put that out to the public. The summary is the political statement. That summary then goes back to the scientists and said, okay, make sure your science report agrees with what we put out as the summary. So it's like an executive writing a summary and saying to the employees, write a report that agrees with my summary. That's how they've written the rules.
Or that's like if I tell my accountant, hey, this is how many taxes I owe, make sure all the accounting you do matches that.
Exactly, and so this is what they've done, and it's through that UN and the IPCC, and of course then the specific focus on CO2, which we already talked about, to bring these things down. And within those reports, by the way, they leave out, and they're computer models, and of course these are the same models that can't tell you what the weather's going to be like 10 days from now, and yet they're quite certain of what's going to happen 50 and 100 years from now. And it's all based on computer models, but in those computer models, they leave out huge parts of what we know.
That's right. These aren't even the classic models. These are, it's been admitted, fixed models where they build it for the result they want.
Yep. And of course, one of them, as we've already mentioned, they build in the fact that if the CO2 increases, the temperature will go up. Yet all of the natural evidence shows us that it's exactly the other way around, that the temperature increases before the CO2. But so every time you look at something, you can see how they've manipulated to achieve the result that they want. So it's literally garbage in, garbage out. And I mentioned already the one about the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. None of that, that's called the Milankovitch effect. None of that is included in their climate models.